Drug statistics, specifically pot, marijuana. Drug statistics, this from the Drug Policy Alliance. In 2016, we don't have the numbers yet for 2017, the year just ended a few weeks ago, but in 2016, 653,239 people were arrested for marijuana law violations nationwide. And of those charged with possession, 89%, 574,641 human beings were charged with marijuana possession in the year 2016. The proportion of people incarcerated for a drug offense in state prisons who are black or Latino, 57%. Nothing close to 57% of the population. Obviously, we're not enforcing our drug laws in a way that reflects any sort of lack of bias. And the number of students who have lost federal financial aid eligibility because of a drug conviction, again, over 574,000 marijuana possession arrests just in 2016. Over 200,000 students have lost their ability to even apply for financial aid because of this sort of thing. I mean, this is a real train wreck. And in the midst of this, you got Jeff Sessions coming in saying, oh, yeah, we'll go into the states and bust things up. Tamar Todd is with us, the director of the Office of Legal Affairs of the Drug Policy Alliance. Drugpolicy.org is the website. You can tweet Tamar at drugpolicy.org. And am I pronouncing your name right?
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you. Tamar, thank you for being with us. And
yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is a hot topic. And there are some who are saying that Sessions' position is he's not actually going to have the Justice Department go after states or people in the states, that really all he was doing was asserting this is the law, we are going to at least observe the law, and if you don't like the law, talk to Congress. And that might actually provoke a change in Congress to decriminalize some of these things, or at least, lower them on the schedule. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, it is true. He didn't say we're going to go into the states and enforce all federal law, because the reality is that the U.S. attorneys and the Department of Justice have to make choices about which laws they enforce and how they choose to use their resources. So the question now is, Jeff Sessions really going to divert, limited federal law enforcement resources away from enforcing violent crime, illicit trafficking across state lines, those types of things, and go after legal, regulated, well-run medical marijuana industries that are acting in accordance with state law and disrupt that? Or is he going to use those federal resources as they should be used to really, go after problematic issues? And that's, is unclear. I think what has happened, though, is he's injected some uncertainty into what's happened. And we've heard there was a chorus of outcry from both Republicans and Democrats, and many state AGs and state lawmakers by his rescission of the Obama-era memo that gave that guidance and created some consistency and stability across the states. Right.
So is your sense of it, as the director of the Office of Legal Affairs of the Drug Policy Alliance, is your sense of it that this, you got Cory Gardner, the Republican from Colorado, a longtime, such a hardcore right-winger, he campaigned on fetal personhood. Coming out and saying this is outrageous what Jeff Sessions is doing. Might it be that this is the moment for the country, our elected officials, to say enough of this crazy drug war?
It might be, particularly on this issue. The memo of the previous administration, it was always just guidance. People still remain somewhat vulnerable to U.S. attorneys. There were still huge problems posed by federal law, one example being banking, where despite the guidance of non-enforcement by the Department of Justice, banks were very, very reluctant to provide banking services to many in the industry. So it was, not by any means a complete solution. And now we see where there's even more uncertainty, and the fear is really the federal government going to jump in and start undoing what states and voters in states have chosen to do on their own? There's we now see in the latest public opinion polling that Republican voters for the first time support legalizing the use of marijuana. And then much higher support for that, of course, is respecting states' rights and the ability of states to move forward without federal interference, which really is, a bipartisan issue on this, is what we've seen. So it may be that in an effort likely by Sessions, since he's been very vocal about his dislike of marijuana and people who use marijuana, in an effort to disrupt and slow things down, maybe in the end history will show that he in fact sped things up by pushing Congress to come up with a more permanent, workable solution that allows states to proceed and other states to adopt legalization, because those numbers that you quoted at the beginning about arrests, the vast majority of those are actually under state law.
Right.
It's state and local law enforcement that does the vast majority of drug law enforcement. So there's still obviously a lot of states that should be looking towards reform and adopting reform on the local level and state level, and not using their resources, to give out these low-level marijuana arrests that then, as you pointed out, disrupt people in so many ways: employment, housing, ability to get a credit card, sometimes ability to vote. That can carry through, forward through your life, so that this small, what seemingly minor arrest that people make it out to be actually magnifies in a way that's really harmful to individuals.
Right. We're talking with Tamar Todd, the director of the Office of Legal Affairs of the Drug Policy Alliance. Drugpolicy.org is their website, and you can tweet them at drugpolicy.org. In one of the neat little tricks that they do in authoritarian regimes is selective enforcement of very, very broad laws. The example that comes to mind, and I don't know if this is still the case, it was, I think, about a decade ago. I had a guest on this program who was very familiar with the situation in China, who was talking about it, was that in China there's a law that says that you can't move without the permission of the local police department, but nobody ever bothers to enforce or do that. And pretty much over the last 40 years or so, everybody in China has moved. So everybody is a lawbreaker. So when the government wants to take somebody down, that's one of the things that they'll do, is they'll go in, oh, you moved and you didn't register with the police, 5 years in jail. And, but really they're going after them because they're a dissident, or they're speaking out, that kind of selective enforcement. We saw this admitted to by John Ehrlichman as the specific strategy of the Nixon administration with regard to the war on drugs. He said, the Nixon administration's enemies were the anti-war hippies and black people, but you couldn't outlaw anti-war hippies or black people, so we highly criminalized heroin and marijuana, or marijuana and heroin respectively, going after, in order to, quote, disrupt their communities, end quote. Could it be that Jeff Sessions is putting this back on the burner, not because he expects the Justice Department or the FBI or anybody else to do some massive nationwide enforcement, but rather that they know that a lot of the people who are, shall we say, troublemakers from the point of view of Jeff Sessions, the people who are calling for civil rights, the people who are calling for voting rights, that, liberals, progressives, young people in particular, are more likely to smoke pot than be alcoholics, seriously. And therefore they could use these for selective prosecutions. Or am I being totally paranoid here?
Well, I think it's far from being paranoid, because I think there's very concrete evidence that was the origin of the criminalization of marijuana and the criminalization of the other drugs. I mean, it's important to remember that, people use drugs throughout time and across race and across society, and we choose to criminalize some, like marijuana, very severely, and we choose not to criminalize others, like alcohol, based very much on, as we now know, the historical evidence shows, based on the racial groups and the society groups that were using those drugs. And they played out very much in that way. I mean, we have incredible racist enforcement of the marijuana laws in every state, every city, every county across the country.
It's terrible.
And we know
Tamar,
that people use marijuana at the same rates across racial groups.
You're right.